there! What's life giving you today? Welcome back to Moving with Meaning, the podcast where actions have meaning, words have meaning, and we open up the conversations to discover what's your next move. I'm your host, Krystal. This episode, we have a guest who plans to walk us through some, shall we say, communication styles. I've heard so much about these variants of expressions and can't wait to do a partial deep dive into them. But first, we need to set the theme. So let's go ahead and do that. The word of the day is desire. I think this word is so much more than the typical context associated with attraction. Ever felt a strong compulsion to want something from someone, to feel worthy, needed, essential? What is that something? How do we find what that is? And does this desire change over time and with various peoples in our lives? I'm jumping ahead here, but that's how excited I am about our topics we are gonna go get ready to explore. In fact, our guest suggested we do this in 3 parts to get the full context. I don't want to spoil the episode, so how about we introduce our guest? And there's no one better to do that than himself. Dr. Paul, why don't you give the people a bit of background about yourself and about part 1 that you are going to take us through today?
Thank you, Krystal. Pleasure to be with you today. I just want to talk a little bit about the things that come genetically versus generationally. Mostly I want to talk about the generational thing today. Genetic is something that we really can't help, but I think we can do something about the generational thing. And I want to start actually with my grandfather. I did not know any of my grandfathers, but I've read about it and I've done a little genealogy, found out some things about my grandfather that I want to share today. My grandfather was born in Indiana in the United States and got married, had 9 children. After that 9th child was born, his wife suddenly passed away. I don't know if it was from the childbirth or what exactly she passed away from, but he was absolutely distraught, as most people would be when their spouse passes away. So distraught that he decided that actually he was going to make some major decisions. One of those major decisions, or those things that happen in life, a trauma that is been labeled a trauma, is to move, to get out of that place. So he's going to sell all his farm and he's going to sell all the equipment. At the auction, he may have said something like this: "And would you like this child? And would you like this child?" And systematically gave all the children away except for one. Benjamin, he took with him to Montana, moved to Montana, found a school teacher that had never been married, had 10 more children with her, of which my father's number 6. So my father was born in 1922, and when he's 10 years old, this grandfather, his father, passes away. So 1932, you're in the middle of the Depression, so it's bad times. But also him passing away is a bad time because now you've got 19 children, not only 10 or not only 9, but 19 children that are abandoned. They don't have a father. They have a loving mother, and I remember my grandmother, her name was Grace, and she lived up to that name perfectly. She had been a school teacher. She absolutely loved children. I just remember climbing the stairs to her apartment when she was elderly, and she would just welcome the grandchildren. She was just so very kind. In contrast, I had a grandmother on my mother's side that just yelled at the children, and that was not so fun to be there. But I love this grandmother. Grandma Zolman was her name. And Grandma Zolman was just that sweet person. But I'm not sure that that disposition passed on to all the children, especially because of economic times and everything else. Because of that problem, my father could only attend school till 8th grade. He had to drop out of school to start working, start doing some other things to help with the family at the time. And as he's working, he's finding out he likes mechanics, likes diesel mechanics, became a little diesel mechanic, and then he became a truck driver. And that's how I remember him when I was growing up, that he would be gone through the week, Then he'd come home on the weekends. I love this about my father, that every Friday when he came home, we didn't hardly see him, but he took my mother out on a date every single Friday.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't very creative about the dates. It was always a Maverick bar, always over alcohol. And you can imagine what the scene is. How was your week? And how was your week? And back and forth. And I can imagine my mother, I'm number 10 of 11 children. So generationally, my father toned it down a little bit. He didn't have 19 children like his dad. He only had 11. Krystal, I've taken it one more step myself. I only had 8. So, and then my children are only having 3. I don't get it. Why is that? Anyway, but I can imagine my mother starting at the oldest. When she starts at the oldest, she said, well, what went wrong? Or hard. I can't imagine her saying what might have went right, because she's trying to vent her complaints. As most people do, they vent their complaints about what went wrong. And so my father's getting annoyed, and then he's getting annoyed, and then he's getting annoyed. By the time he's to number 10, he is mad. He's ready. Let me paint the picture just a little bit better. I'm a thorn between 2 roses. I've got a sister that's older and a sister that's younger, and I'm right in between them. And all the rest are brothers. Brothers are boys. They're going to do what boys do. You know, just think of it like puppies, Krystal. When puppies are wrestling and they're just little puppies, they're going to swat at each other. They're going to roll around. They're going to wrestle. They're going to do all this. They're going to break arms and legs and everything like that. You know, maybe they're not wrestling that tough, but my brothers broke bones, not mine, but their own, in their own little stupidity. And so that's going to make your dad mad. You know, he's got to pay this doctor bill and all this and extra expenses, and just, I would be upset too. Just why can't they just be good? So by the time they get to number 10, my dad's really upset. Most weekends, I absolutely dreaded the weekend because I either got the belt or I got a severe spanking. One time, Krystal, I'm sad to admit, I had a spanking that was so hard that I was black and blue for 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. It was more like a beating than anything else. And so it was just that sad situation that we kind of grew up in. They weren't all bad times. Sometimes the family got together. As dysfunctional as we were, we'd play some games. But the games were still kind of angry type games. That it was all smack talk, and I'm going to get you, and all this strategy and everything, and just what the smack talk would do. And the angry atmosphere was more of an angry culture that I was raised in. So from that culture, there at the time, it was like the Ghostbusters. Who are you going to call? Because at the time, there weren't really the network of agencies that there are now that would be that safety net for children who to call. The culture was more like, that's just how our family disciplines, that's how our family is raised. Our parents did that. And so generationally, we pass on what we learned from our parents. I thought there's got to be a better way. Absolutely got to be a better way. To escape from that, you have to move out. And I guess as parents, you kind of want that for your children. You want them to move away. You don't want to have them until they're 40 years old in your house or whatever. You just don't want that. So I left when I was 17, right after my junior year of high school, and I moved in with my brother. And I realized that my brother, he was an excellent father. He still had that anger issue that my father had, that he would be stacking. He'd stack annoyance on top of annoyance on top of annoyance on top of annoyance, and then he'd flash. He'd have these angry moments, and it almost came to the point that you were waiting for that, holding your breath, and for that flash. You didn't know when it was going to happen. You just try to be very careful, tiptoe a little bit, walk on eggshells, whatever you want to call it. That's what you're doing around people like that. So I realized that I had that same thing. I had that same flashing and that same annoyance, that same pattern in my own life. It was not until age 35 that I realized that, you know what, I've been blaming my father for all the social awkwardness and all the family awkwardness my whole life, all the way up till age 35. By the time I was 35, my father was he'd been dead for 7 years. Mm-hmm. So even when he's dead, I'm still blaming him, and he can't even defend himself. I can't even talk to him. I can't talk it out. I can't do anything, and I'm still blaming him. But then I decide, he's gone. I'm responsible for my own actions. And that's kind of where I came to. But just imagine that, or somebody having a anger fit in the middle of a public place. What's that look like? Do people say congratulations? No, it's not like that at all. People are saying, whoa, watch out for that guy. Or they're calling on their cell phone nowadays and reporting that, or they're taking pictures of videos, then they're posting it. They're doing a lot of different things today than they were back then. It was awkward enough. Who wants to be in an awkward situation like that? My family didn't want that, and it really impacted my relationship. So it impacted my relationship so much that after 23 and a half years, 8 children, my wife decides she wants a different life. She leaves, we divorce, and I've got primary custody of the children. So there's 5 children left in the house at the time. I had one weekend, she had the next weekend. I had them during the week. So when it's her weekend, I decided I'm gonna go start dating. I'm gonna see what this looks like. So I started looking online and putting my profile online, and I was thinking, what am I gonna do when I find someone that's in a different city? And I thought, oh, well, we'll just kind of find a meeting place. And so I actually kept doing that, and I met people. I was in Charleston, South Carolina at the time, so I went down to Daytona Beach. I went to Jacksonville, Florida, went to Atlanta, went to Columbia, South Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, New York City, Kansas City, Nashville, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, Cabo San Lucas, Snowflake, Arizona, many other places that I went, and I called it destination dating. In this destination dating, the way I'd qualify the people online, because you just don't know about what people are doing online, you just qualify them. I just had this series of questions that I'd ask, and then from that series of questions, I'd find out kind of a little bit about their character. From that, I'd make it a date. But I didn't find anything. It was like the song lyrics that looking for love in all the wrong places. And I just could not find what I was looking for. Started to realize that maybe it's me. And I don't know if you remember, if you're Christian or not, Krystal, but
Yes.
at the Last Supper, Jesus says the statement, one of you is going to betray me. And not just Judas, but all the apostles said, Lord, is it I? And when they said that, it's like a humble attitude. And so I started realizing that, well, I'm not finding love here. And then I thought, Lord, is it I? What do I need to do to improve in my life? What do I need to do to become the quality of person that I would want to date? Mm-hmm. I started working on that.
Okay, well, maybe I can relate to a little bit of that, or at least my parents. So my father had a very similar situation like yours, where he was beaten on, and there was a bit of disdain. And my parents really raised me to be independent as a reaction to seeing their parents' relationships, because they wanted to improve on the next generation, theirs. And so it influenced how they wanted to raise me, their daughter, not my brother, their daughter. That's a big key for me, is because it's kind of the same thing, as I'm seeing a different dynamic between my brother. I mean, even to the point where there was an absence of emotion, where my brother could express emotion, I couldn't, because it was interpreted as weak. It was damaging to the person that they were raising me to be.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I couldn't let anyone see that, they fazed me a little bit. I had to really keep that inside. So I had, and still have, this stockpile of emotion that I'm working on getting out, because it was killing me, literally. How did you differentiate between the source of your perspective or influence and then your accountability? It's always that moment where you're kind of like you said, Lord, is it I? Yeah. Is that the moment that you were able to separate out what happened to me, the source of my situation, and then owning it to basically change your future?
Great question, Krystal. Let me explain it this way. The Lord is that I moment was not an event.
Mm-hmm.
It's a daily thing that I'm trying to improve daily. And I think that the problem really wasn't the adversity. The adversity, instead of being a foe, instead of being the enemy, suddenly became the friend. That because I came from that austere background, because I came from that type of abusive thing, I wanted something a whole lot better, not just a little bit better, something a lot better. And I think that's been the motivation all along for me, is that I want something a whole lot better, something that is just different. Within that childhood, there's that angry culture, there's a vocabulary there. There are angry words. There's angry humor that bites, humor that puts people down. And they might think it's funny, but the person receiving it obviously doesn't think it's funny.
Yes.
And I always thought there's got to be a different way. There's got to be something different that we can do. And I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm thinking opposites. What would be the opposite of this type of circumstance? What would be the opposite of anger? And came up with the word love. And so I'm trying to focus on becoming more loving. In that focus, I'm saying things to myself from that background that I didn't have any knowledge of just how to say it any different. I said, I don't want to be angry. And the only time double negatives like that work is in math. If you multiply two negative numbers together, that's the only time you're ever going to get a positive.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work in relationships. So I had to really kind of retool my own vocabulary, my own sentence structure, everything that was passed down from my parents in that 8th grade education. My mother graduated from high school, but no college education at all. The older brother that I went to live with, he decided that he was going to be the first one to go to college. And I believe that really helped him. I think that education was really a key to overcoming the adversity as a foe and making adversity the friend.
Okay, that's actually a good question. And I think that's important to say. It's a daily event. It
Absolutely
doesn't happen once, which is great because it's about continuous improvement, continuous growth, continuous investment in yourself. A second question I had. So you talked a little bit about your relationship. So I want to give you my perspective with my relationship with my husband. This is something that we're working on, trying to figure this out, because I kind of feel when we started, we were probably double negatives. We were both introverts and we were both emotionally distant. Okay, so we had a very difficult time expressing emotion. So with my husband, when we dated, we actually discussed the typical things that you discuss. What we felt was important to each of us. Like, what did we want out of the other that was very significant? And now that I look back at it, we were pretty proactive about our needs from each other. So mine was, I want to know. Like, talk to me. Don't let somebody tell me something about you and I don't know. Mm-hmm. So in short, communication. Okay.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be blindsided.
No. It was very important for me. Mm-hmm. For his, it was attention. And I don't know which category that one would fall in, and we'll get into that. Just put a pin into this one so that when we get to part two, I'll ask this again. Well, where is this? What part this was in? But I remember rolling my eyes, not in a dismissive manner, but I remember thinking, what's with every guy wanting attention? And and the issue for me was that I wasn't an overly affectionate person at the time due to past trauma and, again, how I was raised. So I didn't know how to really do what he wanted. And I felt very inadequate, I guess. And I remember prior relationships failing because I wasn't meeting this need. I remember guys asking me, come see me. I need you, this or that. And I'm just like, look, I don't have time for this. What it, you know, it was like, why do you need all this extra? To me, it was extra. It wasn't a necessity. So I knew I wanted this one to work. And to be honest, I think it did, because we both were trying and not really succeeding, but we recognized the effort. So we're like, okay, we're getting, you know, we understand, we see each other trying to do this, but we're still not meeting the need, but the effort's there. So that's good. Let's get married. So now when we got married, it was like the trial period is over though. So we got married before the trial and error phased out. So we, you know, and so now when you get married, you're like, okay, we should be on the same page. And we weren't. And so we fully expected each other to kind of already have it together. We're in that place now where we're trying to figure that out. But what do you say about that?
I would say that it's difficult as it might be to send out what they need. I would find out just through your actions, just kind of do some observation. Watch when he lights up, or watch, you know, and you can do this with anybody, not just your husband, but watch when people light up. Whenever you're sending something out and they're lighting up, that's the type of love that they would like. And it's taken me a long time to learn that, to be observant and just use your eyes that way, and use your heart. When you're sending stuff out and they're lighting up, you've hit it. You've hit their number. And it's it sounds like more of a guessing game that way, and it kind of is. But with that communication that he's doing for you, he's trying to send it to you, trying to help you understand that what he needs. And I'm not, without any specifics, I would listen and find out what is it that he likes. Ask him what he likes, and you probably have already done that. You've probably asked him, and you probably have already gone down that road a few times. But just ask him some different questions that, well, is this something you might like? Is something that maybe you've not talked about? And maybe does this work for you? And just find the whole spectrum. And I think that's probably what you want to just learn. What is the spectrum of what does he really like? And then just watch and observe how he reacts. And then watch him with his friends. Watch what he likes with his friends. Watch what he likes with interacting with other people. If you're able to see those type of circumstances, just watch how he's reacting to other people. And then just when he reacts really happy or something like that, maybe that's something that you can mirror. Just
Gotcha.
just take advice from watching him. Just watching his reactions.
You know what? That's a really good point, because it's almost one of those things where I'm waiting for him to tell me, but he's showing me, and I'm just kind of I'm not paying attention. I'm not observing him. So thank you for that.
You can't wait around for love, and people that wait around for love, they get to this pity party point that and it's all about them. But just make it about him, and make it, and if you can just step outside of yourself, just make it about him. What's going to help him be happiest, and just hold that foremost in your mind, and hopefully he'll hold that foremost in his mind to make you happy. Then the relationship's going to work.
Thank you. I truly appreciate that sound advice. So, Dr. Paul, are you ready to give us your golden nuggets and add that ketchup just to recap?
Absolutely. You know, there's a we're talking a little bit about languages and about how to communicate right now. There's a Sanskrit language in northern India that from the Sanskrit dialect, we get words like nirvana, words like karma. But I want to talk a little bit about the word namaste, just for a minute. Namaste. At the end of a yoga session, the instructor might put their hands together like they're praying, thumbs to the chest and the fingers pointed straight up, and they'll bow their head and close their eyes and say namaste. It doesn't mean class is all over, y'all. You can all go home now. It doesn't mean that. What the Hindu interpretation says is that the divine in me sees the divine in you. I think in any relationships, if we're watching for the good in other people, instead of watching for the bad, everybody has bad, everybody has good, focus on the good. I like to compare it just to a magnifying glass, that what you magnify is going to grow bigger. And that namaste, watching for the divine in other people, bringing that divine out by recognizing it in other people, is really going to help our relationships all the better. Watch for what's good about your husband and praise him about that. Watch for what's good about your wife or just your spouse. Just praise them for what's good about them. Don't be critical. And that sounds like a double negative. Don't be critical. Just be positive. Be the one that sends the compliment out. Send it out, and it'll come back to you. It will.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And before we close, I want to share a personal story in the discovery of communication as a lead into our part 2.
Okay.
This was an incredible, somber, and humbling moment for me. Remember, being humble isn't lowering your importance, but recognizing your value and strengths. And what made it somber is that I had to let my pride go and actually admit I needed something from those around me. I was afraid of the rejection. Like, the word need to me was admitting to dependency. And it wasn't until I was really down, and I mean really down, and to be honest, there was nowhere else to go but up. And it wasn't so much that I couldn't do it on my own, not when I'm surrounded by so many people who I relied on, mainly my husband. I had to tell him just being here, present, around, and just being here was not enough. I needed him to be more attentive and tell me and show me and do things that demonstrated that he wanted to be here. Otherwise, it just translates to obligation, like he's stuck. So I think that was the point where we started to grow into our expression stage, which we are still in. So don't assume that your significant other knows, and speaking up with what you need is powerful in so many ways. So that's the episode today. I truly appreciate you for taking us through your initial journey of gaining a fresh perspective. Are any of you working through tracing back the source of your personality and protective walls? How is this impacting your relationships or commitments today? What part of Dr. Paul's story in taking back control of defining who you want to be relates to you? Even if you feel you have it all together, I'd still love to hear how you took the steps to become aware of your needs and the communication of that. I love it all, and so will someone else. Before we let you go, Dr. Paul, why don't you go ahead and remind the people who you are, where they can find your resources, or reach out to you.
Thank you, Krystal. They can find me at roleoflove.com, ROLE of love.com. That's probably the best place to find me.
All right, I'll make sure to include all of Dr. Paul's resources and connections in the episode description, as well as on my website resources page, movingwithmeaning.com. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show, Moving With Meaning, the podcast, and tap that alert button so you know when these episodes drop. I am on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. If I get enough downloads and follows, I might be inspired to drop a few episodes in a single week. So please share, like, follow, repost, tag someone. We are creating a community. Quick housekeeping before you go. Follow me on Instagram at movingwithmeaning82 and my Facebook page, Moving With Meaning. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. My YouTube channel, Moving With Meaning, is now up and running, so run across there and hit subscribe. I do dabble in TikTok at Krystal B. Clark. Links are in the episode. Alrighty, I'm Krystal on Moving With Meaning, the podcast, reminding you to take it one step at a time. All moves have meaning. Check y'all later.